Hello, welcome to Zigmatech Learning Hub. I will be your instructor for fine art. You can call it visual art as well, cultural and creative art. Now for this class, we are going to be taking our exercises from the ExamGuide app. Now if you don't have this application installed already in your device, I will advise you download this app in order for you to follow along this class. Now, ExamGuide is a leading educational app that helps students prepare adequately for exams, for various exams, such as UTME, post-UTME, WAEC, GCE, KCPE, IJMB, JUPEB, Calbepedia, BECE, JSCE, NCEE, NECO, to mention but a few. You can download the app from our website www.examguide.com, or you can download it as well as using your Google Play Store. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to be updated on new videos as we upload. Now, if you're ready for today's class, okay, let's get started. Okay, welcome back to your cultural and creative arts, your fine art or your visual arts class. And we are going to take the last section of the utilization of local material. I'm just excited because it has been a long one. And if you've been with us this while, man, I'm giving you kudos. You've done so well. All right, so now let's veg into the class and see what we'll learn at the end of this topic. All right, our specific objective. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define leatherwork. Number 2, the materials and tools for leatherwork. Number 3, the locations of leatherwork. And then, what are the uses of leather? We also look at the treatment and how to maintain leather. Then some of the things, number 5, some of the other things we're going to look at is embroidery. We've been hearing the word embroidering. What exactly is embroidering? We also look at to state the types of stitches in embroidering. We'll describe the different materials for embroidering. We also define needlecraft. We'll go further to explain macrame and then the uses of embroidery. All these are the things and even more we are going to look at in the course of this study. Now, leatherwork. Leatherwork is the production of decorative and functional objects mainly from the hide and skin. If you look on the screen, you will see the leather, you will see some beautiful items on a table. Now that's explain what the leather or the leatherwork is. Now if you look, this is a shoe. Don't worry, as we proceed, as we move further in class, we're going to explain and talk about some of the uses and how all those things are being made. The hide and skin comes from animal skin. The hide from the bigger animals, which is while the skin from smaller animals. Now bigger animals such as cow, camel, elephants, leopard, etc. are the bigger animals. They're known as what? They produce hide, while skins are obtained from goats, sheep, antelope, and smaller reptiles. Now those are the difference between the hide and what? The skin. Now if you look at what you're seeing here, it's done from leather. These are pure leather bags. You see how strong and how rugged it looks? It is gotten from hide or the skin. I told you the hide is from the bigger animal, while the skin is from the smaller animal. Bigger animals like the leopard, the elephant, the cow, and the camel. They are the hide, while the skin is the smaller animal. Now let's look at the process of treating leather. The process and treating of leather. Now the process of curing and treating leather is called tanning. Tanning is simply the process of curing and treating leather. So if you're in your exams, you've been asked, or you see the question, define tanning. Tanning is simply the curing and treating of a leather. Now the tanning process is universal. There is just one universal method of tanning leather. The basic steps in preparing hide and skin require scraping away the fatty layer under the skin to remove, the oily effect that the leather or the skin has. Now this is exactly what the young man there is doing. He's taking his time to tan the leather. He's treating the leather in order to acquire or to gain the desired, leather. Now the skin is then washed and dressed. Now the washing is done by rubbing in oil. Example, egg yolk, You can use the brain and liver of what? Of a cattle, you know, to wash the skin of, you know, of the animal that you're using. It could be the skin or the hind. Now, some may use salt and alum, you know, for tanning. Now, tanning, a chemical agent, form a bond and preserve the skin. Now, the essence of using these things to wash the skin is to preserve it, you know, to kill that smell, you know, to make it plastic-like. So that's the essence of what? Tanning. So we use those things to bond and preserve the skin. Now, the use of vegetable matter like the tree bark tend to color the skin. Example, the bark of a lac tree tend to give the skin of the animal a dark red kind of color. So most times, if you, depending on the kind of color you're looking for, so that would determine the kind of chemical you use in your tanning process. Don't forget, I told you tanning is defined as the act of what? Treating or caring or what? Leather. Now, this is a leather tanning. You know, this is already made leather, and then they're just retanning it to make it last long. Now, let's look at the uses of leather. Leather is used for handmade leather cushions, for briefcases, for bags, for toil, for money purse, for shoe, for cosmetic container, for leather bookcase, for boots, for belt, for earring, for necklace, for bracelets, and for anklets, to mention but a few. All these are the uses of leather. Leather is sometimes sewn around chains and worn as what? Armlets or waistband, or simple carried about inside pockets as local insurance or magical what? Object. Now, some persons have actually converted this leather into, you know, spiritual purposes, you know, as their Taliban, to protect themselves for any God knows what they have in mind. So now these are some of the beautiful products from the leather. You see how beautiful the palm slippers and the sandals and even the shoes, even the bag beneath, how interesting and how beautiful they look. They don't come cheap. Now, other use include dressing of horses before mounting on it, you know, to make your horse cheer, especially during Duba. Duba is a northern festival where the horse riders, they decorate their horses and then use it to race in northern Nigeria. Now, in Nigeria, leatherwork is mainly produced in the northern part of the country as a result of the abundance of cow and sheep and camel and any other thing that they have there. You know, they have large sun and they have a lot of cows, sheep, goats, camel in the north. So it is mainly practiced in the north. So in the northern part of Nigeria, that's where you see more of the leather work and the leather bag. Now let's look at the decorating or the decoration of what? Leather. Now several techniques are used in decorating leather. Now this include painting with knife, with brushes, with dyeing. You can batik the leather, you know, for appliances in some cases, and what? Even embroidering. You can even embroider on a leather. Oh yes, during the course of this study, I'm going to explain what embroidering is, and then you understand exactly what embroidering is. Now, the tanned leather is worked on by a group of craftsmen, usually in small groups, you know. Now, this is a leather that has been tanned, and now it has started it's been working on, you know, to produce. It could be a shoe that is trying to produce, it could be a bag, it could be anything that is trying to get out of the leather. Now, the leather is damped with damp sand and allowed to remain for some hours to make the leather more palatable. Now, it is rubbed with a smooth stone pattern. It is rubbed with a smooth stone, and then patterns are sketched on the surface of the skin with a knife or incision. Now, after individual parts has been decorated, now it is being seamed or joined together by glue or with mallet and paste to make a bag or any other thing they want to form out of the leather. Now this is the process of making anything. It could be a bag that is making here, it could be a saving purse, it could be a wallet, it could be a shoe, it could be a belt. So that's just the process it undergoes. Now holes are made with an awl for stitching, and then lacing it is used to join the past. Now most of these designs on leather work are usually geometric, triangular, squares, lines, and bonds, etc. Now, these are some of the different designs that you see on a leather bag. All right, so now let's go and look at embroidery. Now, remember I told us that leather, they are used to make shoes, bag. I itemized all those things in our previous class. So now let's look at embroidery. What exactly is embroidery? Now, the art of decorating clothes with sewing or with sewn designs in sequence, forming a pattern, can be referred to as embroidery. The art of decorating clothes with sewn designs in sequence, forming a pattern, can be referred to as what? Embroidery. So if you sew something in sequence to create a pattern on a cloth, is known as embroidery. Embroidery is usually done on fabric, on leather work, on clothes, on anything that can allow you to sew on it. So now this is the perfect example of what an embroidered material, an embroidered material object. So you see how beautiful and how intricate, how loving it looks. So that is exactly what embroidering is all about. Now, embroidering in Nigeria as a craft is a very popular tradition among the Hausas and the Nupe community. It is used on nearly all their garments, in every Muslim garment, forgive that word Muslim, in every Hausa or Fulani or even the Nupe people, on their garments, you see what? Embroidery. That is what, when I was growing up, there is a cloth we call the 1,500. So if you know presidents, like for those of us that are in Nigeria here, I don't know where you see me, you see their clothes, the Northerners, they usually wear this beautiful embroidered babariga that is actually called, chieftaincy or so. So that is exactly what embroidery is. It is used on nearly all their garments. For the Hausa farmers, from the Hausa farmer clothes to the rider, robe, and down to the ceremonial apparel. By the mid-90s or the mid-19th century, embroidering on clothes was an established craft in Africa, to be precise, in Nigeria, in the mid-90s. Now, gorgeous and voluminous robes, intricately embroidered, are symbols of prestige and rank for men in Nupe and the Hausa community. Although embroidering is common in the northern part of Nigeria, the Yoruba tradition robes are also what? Embroidered. So not just the Hausa people that embroider their materials. Some of the Yoruba people also embroider their materials. Now let's look at types of stitching, because some of this embroidering, they are handmade. Oh yes, they are handmade. Thank God for technology that now we have embroidery machine, but mainly it is what? Handmade, based on the images and the pictures we've been seeing so far. So let's look at 3 types of stitching. 3 types of what? Stitching we have, and they are primarily the chain stitching and the buttonhole stitching, and then we have the crocheting. We have what? The crocheting. There are other stitches, but we'll just concentrate on these few. All right. Now, types of stitches. Now, you see all these are different types of what? Of stitches that you can actually practice, and they have their name. Now, embroidering can be handmade or made with the help of a modern automatic sewing needle machine. Now, even though machine embroidering is quicker and it can be mass produced, it is not nearly as satisfying as hand embroidery. Now, did you understand that? Now, no matter how interesting or how fast or how mass produce you can actually produce with any electrical embroidery, it is not as satisfying as hand embroidering. The hand embroidering is still the best and the always go to. Now, it is only with the hand embroidering that you can actually create some of these intricate effects and then gain the needed accuracy which you're looking for. Now, the stitching is done with either imported or indigenous thread, or either imported or hand-woven clothes. Now, frequently, indigenous silk thread in its own creamy color is used for most prestigious and elegant regalia or robes on hand-woven, narrow-bound clothes, which is also often creamy in color. All right, so these are the steps. If you're planning to make an embroidery, you can pause this and understand the different ways at which you can actually create your patterns and design. We have the running stitch, we have the hemming stitch, we have the basting stitch, we have the catch stitch, we have the slip stitch, we have the back stick the back stitch, we have the invisible stitch, to mention but a few, and even the overcast stitch. All these are the different stitching method. Now the rope color are magenta and indigo. Occasionally, embroidering is used on just one small part of a costume. So it's not something that is done in the entire costume. Now let's look at the concept in design. Now motif driven from geometric animal, buildings, flower, trees, or abstract are often used singly or in combination. Now designs are usually related twice or 4 times, and sometimes alternately, depending on the concept or what you really want to achieve. Okay, now that is another simple method of the local way of planning your hand kind of embroidery. Now remember, embroidering is usually done with a needle. It is usually done with a needle. Now let's look at the basic rules of embroidering work. Now fabric must be sustained or suitable for the article being made. Design should not be too elaborate for the article and should embrace or express the originality of the designer. Now the design should not be too loud. It should just hit the nail on the head to explain the concept of the design. Now let's look at stitches, some of the stitches. Stitches must be suitable and sensible and varied without making a decorative stitch simpler or simpler than the article. Long sketchy stitchy should be avoided. Like if your sketches are too long or too elaborate, you should avoid them. Color should be as natural as possible. Green for leaves, pink for flowers, yellow for pollen, dust, etc. Don't try to mix things. And whenever you want to embroider, you make sure you draw your concept on the surface of what you want to embroider, and then before you start following it a step after another. All right. Now, the weight of the embroidery should suit the type of article being made. For example, light embroidery should be used on a tray embroidered. Other form of embroidery, like for table cover, or should also carry some kind of brief flower designs, which is first draw on the background before you start the embroidery. The article made should be suitable for the purpose for which it is intended for. You don't just do anything anyhow. Anything you're making, you should do what is suitable and relevant to what you're designing. Now let's look at some of the NEEDLECRAFT that we're going to talk about, which is number one we'll talk about is the MACRAME. Now MACRAME is the art of tying strings in pattern to make anything. By the time you tie strings in a pattern to make something, it's like weaving, but this time around it is not really weaving, it's MACRAME. You tie to make something. Okay, so now this is a beautiful example. This is not MACRAME though, but this is embroidery. This is embroidery. So it's just a kind of a sample of what it is all about. So material used in making MACRAME. Number one, you need a strings or a twine. You need beads. You need wooden handle. You need a liner. So these are the materials that are needed for your embroidering or your MACRAME. You need your scissors. You need your pin. You need your pen. You need a variety of. You need your ropes and you need your fabric at which you want to make your design. Now tools that are needed is just pair of scissors and a measuring tape. Those are the tools. You see your pair of scissors, this is your measuring tape, and these are others, and these are threads, and these are hand sewing needles, these are picker, these are safety pins, and then table chalk, to mark. So these are the tools that are needed for NEEDLECRAFT. Now the basic stitchings include, we have the knots, we have the chain, we have the varied, and then we'll have the card. We have the knots, we have the chain, we have the varied, and then we'll have the cards. Now there are other stitches, but know these four: the knots, the chains, the varied, and the cards. So you can see this in your exam, so you know the right one to choose. As again, these are simple stitching pattern. Now let's look at patterns that can be used in MACRAME. Number one, we have the diamond, we have the X pattern, and then we have the triangle pattern. So these are the few patterns that we're going to look at in the course of this study. So if I should ask you what are the patterns that can be used in MACRAME, You tell me diamond, say X pattern, and then you say your triangular pattern. So all these are the patterns that can be used. Now if you watch here, you'll see some of the patterns that I just itemized. Let me see if I can zoom it close so you can have a feel of them. Yeah, so these are different patterns of NEEDLECRAFT. You can take your time to practice them and then start creating. Now, some objects that can be made in macrame. Now, what are the things you can make with macrame? You can make handbag, you can make shopping bag, you can make belts, and you can also make what? The handband, as in your bangle. Now, those are the things you can make out of macrame. And now, if you look at the wall, these are different macrames. They are wall pendants. Some of them are what you use to hang your flower vase. Some are to save, you know, just to beautify. Some are just wall pendants. Now, it is not woven. They are plaited. So they're just plaited. So these are known as what? Macrame. All right. So let's look at the uses of embroidery. The uses of embroidery. Now, most embroidered clothes are worn on special occasion. Some are used as bedspread, tablecloths, or wall hanging. Now, most importantly, special embroidered clothes is used for bridal occasion. Now, especially among the Yorubas and even the Hausas too. They try as much as possible to embroider their clothes for their wedding ceremonies. All right. So now this is a perfect example of a hand embroidered fabric. See how clean and how sweet it looks. So that is what embroidering is. Now, embroidering is usually handmade and takes weeks to complete. But nowadays, machine embroidering has supplemented hand embroidering and become popular on shirts, buba, agbada, babariga, and bubu. Wrapper, blouse of women too are also embroidered. So some of the things that can be embroidered, if they ask you what are the things that can be embroidered, now there you go. You see some of the things that can be embroidered is your buba, your babariga, you have your agbada, you have your bubu, you have your wrapper, you have your blouse, you know, etc. All these can be embroidered. Whoa, what a long class. Thank you so very much for sitting this long with us. Now, in summary of everything we've learned so far, let's take a quick rundown of what we've done so far. Now, we talked about the definition of leatherwork. We talked about the materials and the tools for leatherwork. We looked at the uses of leatherwork. Now, we also defined embroidering. We talked about the types of stitches. We mentioned several types of stitches. We look at we describe the difference between material we look at the different materials for embroidery, and then we also define NEEDLECRAFT. We look at explain what macrame is and how to produce macrame, and then finally we talked about the uses of embroidery. What a long class. Thank you so very much for sitting through with us. I want to hope and believe you grabbed a lot out of this lesson. It cannot be a waste. You never wasted your time. You've learned a whole lot. And I believe by the time you go into your exams is an A1, nothing short of it. All right. So, but before we go into the exam, let me give you my own exam so that then we can now, check and balance some of these things that you've learned so far. Okay. Now, the first question I want to ask you is define leatherwork. What is leatherwork? What is leatherwork? I want you to list 2 embroidering patterns you know. Oh yes, 2 embroidering patterns you know. Can you list 2? All right. Now, if you've done that, thank you so very much. Now, let's dive into our exam guide to try our hands on what we have there. Okay. The magic word of exam guide, where we test your brain, your capacity, how ready you are for the exams. All right, now let's kick further. This cultural and creative art, this is your creative art. You check it, get it checked. You go to your questions, you choose random questions, and then you select the number of questions you want. What we did, we talked about craft, talked about crocheting, and then we also looked at weaving, and then finally we looked at what? Leatherwork. Okay, so then I say click OK, and then let's get started. All right, I want us to try our hands on question number 12. Now, the horizontal thread in a weaving process is called dash. The horizontal thread in a weaving process is called dash. A, is it the flock? B, is it the loom? C, is it the shuttle? C, is it the warp? Or C, E, is it the weft? The horizontal. What is horizontal? Is it this one or this? Yes. Is it called the web or the waft? Now, the horizontal is the warp. Well, if that's what you choose, and that is the correct answer. All right. Now let's look at question number 13. Question number 13. Which of the following is the commonest form of weaving? Which of the following is the commonest form of weaving? A, is it basketry? B, is it cane? C, is it clothes? D, hat? And E, mat. Which of these is the commonest? Which one do you see everywhere? Of course, it's clothes. You see clothes everywhere. So clothes is the commonest form of weaving. And then let's see if we can try one question. Now, using a single thread and hook to form a fabric is referred to as dash. A, is it crocheting? B, is it embroidery? C, is it knitting? D, sewing? And E, stitching. So which of it is a single thread and hook to make? Is it crocheting or knitting? The answer is knitting. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using the exam guide. Now, the app scores and give a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. Now, you can learn a particular topic of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and practice mode. It also have other features that make learning fun. Now, it is a must-have for all serious students. Download the app from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and then share this video to anyone you know that would benefit from it. Thank you, and bye-bye.